The scent of fresh bread filled the morning air as Molly Parker bent over the oven in the back kitchen of her family's restaurant, beads of sweat forming on her brow from the heat that radiated through the small space. It was August of 1878 in Coloma, California, and the summer sun had already turned the dusty streets into ribbons of gold before 8 in the morning. She wiped her hands on her flour-dusted apron, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she heard the familiar sound of boots crossing the wooden floor out front. Her mother would handle the early customers while Molly finished the baking that would carry them through the midday rush. At 23 years old, Molly had spent most of her life in this restaurant, learning her mother's recipes and perfecting the art of making a meal that could satisfy a hungry miner or rancher after a long day's work. She had inherited her father's sturdy build and her mother's kind eyes, though her father had been gone for 5 years now, taken by pneumonia one harsh winter. The restaurant was all they had left of him, and Molly poured her heart into keeping it running, even when the whispers and comments cut deep. She knew what people said about her. In a town where most women were rail-thin from hard work and sparse meals, Molly's fuller figure stood out. The other young women in town wore their dresses cinched tight, showing off their narrow waists, while Molly had long ago accepted that no amount of cinching would give her the fashionable silhouette that seemed to matter so much to everyone else. Just last week, she had overheard Martha Jenkins and her daughter laughing outside the general store. Their voices had carried through the open window as Molly selected fabric for a new dress. "Can you imagine how much material that would take?" Martha had said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Poor thing. No man will ever want to court someone who looks like that." The words had stung, but Molly had learned to keep her head high and her feelings hidden. She focused on her work, on helping her mother, and on the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with her hands, even if it was just a perfectly golden loaf of bread or a pie with a flaky, buttered crust. The bell above the front door chimed again, and Molly heard her mother's cheerful greeting. Then came a voice she did not recognize, deep and warm with a slight drawl that suggested the speaker had come from somewhere south of California. "Morning, madam. I heard tell this was the best place in Coloma for a real breakfast." "You heard right," her mother replied. "Sit anywhere you like. Coffee, please." Molly pulled the last loaf from the oven and set it on the cooling rack, then smoothed her apron and stepped through the doorway into the main dining area. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the simple wooden tables and chairs that filled the space. At the far table near the window sat a man she had never seen before. He was tall, she could tell even with him sitting down, with broad shoulders that filled out his blue cotton shirt. His hat rested on the table beside him, revealing dark brown hair that looked like it had been recently cut. He had a strong jaw covered with a few days' worth of stubble, and when he glanced up at her, his eyes were a striking shade of green that seemed to catch the morning light. "Good morning," Molly said, approaching his table with a notepad. "What can I get for you?" He smiled, and something about the genuine warmth in that smile made her heart skip in an unexpected way. "What do you recommend?" "The eggs with ham, fried potatoes, and fresh bread. My mother makes the best coffee in the county, and I just pulled the bread from the oven." "Sounds perfect. I will take that." As Molly wrote down his order and headed to the kitchen, she caught her mother watching her with a curious expression. Catherine Parker had always been protective of her daughter, especially after some of the cruel comments people had made over the years. But there was something almost hopeful in her eyes now. "Who is he?" Molly asked quietly as she began preparing the breakfast. "Said his name is Owen Cooper. Just arrived in town yesterday, looking for ranch work. He has that look about him, like he has been working with horses and cattle his whole life. Owen Cooper. The name suited him somehow. Molly cracked eggs into the hot skillet, added thick slices of ham, and tried to ignore the flutter in her chest. It was foolish to feel anything based on a smile and a kind tone. She had learned that lesson before. 2 years ago, a young man named Thomas had started coming to the restaurant regularly. He had been friendly, always complimenting the food, always asking how her day was going. Molly had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could see past her appearance. Then she had overheard him laughing with his friends outside the saloon one evening, telling them he was just being nice to get cheaper meals, and that he would never actually court the fat girl from the restaurant. That memory still burned, a reminder to guard her heart carefully. She plated Owen's breakfast with care, adding a generous portion of everything, then carried it out to his table along with fresh coffee. He looked up as she approached, and again that smile appeared, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "This looks incredible," he said. "Thank you." "You are welcome. Just call if you need anything else." Molly returned to the kitchen, but she found herself glancing through the doorway more than once as Owen ate his breakfast. He took his time, clearly enjoying each bite, and when he finished, he brought his empty plate to the counter rather than waiting for her to collect it. "That was the best meal I have had in months," he said. "Your mother said you made the bread." Molly nodded, surprised that her mother had mentioned her specifically. "I do all the baking. You have a real talent. I have been on the trail for weeks, eating whatever I could cook over a campfire or find in small towns along the way. This was like coming home to my grandmother's cooking." The compliment was so genuine, so free of any mockery or hidden meaning, that Molly felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. That means a lot." Owen paid for his meal and left a generous tip, then headed toward the door, but he paused before leaving, turning back to look at her. "I will likely be back tomorrow if the breakfast is any indication of what else you serve." "We are open every day except Sunday," Molly said. After he left, her mother came to stand beside her at the window, watching as Owen walked down the dusty street toward the livery stable. "He seems like a good man." "Mother, do not start," Molly said gently. "He is just a customer." "I saw the way he looked at you. That was not just a customer being polite." Molly shook her head, but she could not quite suppress the small smile that tugged at her lips. She busied herself with cleaning the tables and preparing for the lunch crowd, trying not to think about green eyes and a warm smile. True to his word, Owen returned the next morning, and the morning after that. By the end of the week, he had become a regular fixture at the corner table by the window, always ordering breakfast, and always making a point to thank Molly specifically for the food. On the fourth day, he started staying longer, nursing his coffee and watching as she moved through the restaurant, serving other customers and clearing tables. When there was a lull in the activity, he called her over. "Sit with me a minute," he asked. "You have been on your feet all morning." Molly glanced at her mother, who made a shooing gesture toward Owen's table. Hesitantly, Molly slid into the chair across from him. "I wanted to ask you something," Owen said, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "There is a dance at the town hall this Saturday. Would you be willing to go with me?" The question hung in the air between them, and Molly felt her heart begin to race. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grab onto this chance with both hands, but the memory of past humiliation held her back. "Why?" she asked quietly. Owen's brow furrowed. "Why what? Why are you asking me to the dance?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Because I have been in this town for almost a week, and you are the most interesting person I have met. Because your smile lights up this whole room when something makes you happy. Because I would like to spend more time with you outside of this restaurant and get to know you better. Are those good enough reasons? People will talk, Molly said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let them talk. You do not understand. They will say things about you about me. They will wonder why you would choose to be seen with someone who looks like me. Owen's expression shifted, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw anger flash in his green eyes, but it was not directed at her. Has someone been cruel to you? Molly looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. It does not matter. It does matter. His voice was firm but gentle. Molly, I do not give a damn what anyone in this town thinks. I am asking you to the dance because I want to go with you. No other reason. But if you do not want to go, if you are not interested in getting to know me, then just say so and I will respect that. She looked up at him then, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, any hint that this was some kind of cruel joke. But all she saw was honest interest and a touch of hope that mirrored what she was feeling herself. I would like to go, she said finally. I would like that very much. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Then it is settled. I will pick you up at 6 on Saturday. For the rest of the day, Molly felt like she was walking on air. Her mother noticed immediately, and when Molly told her about the dance invitation, Catherine pulled her daughter into a tight hug. I told you he was a good man, she said. Now we need to make sure you have something beautiful to wear. They spent that evening going through Molly's wardrobe, settling on a deep blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Catherine made a few alterations to update the style, adding new lace at the collar and cuffs. As she worked, she talked about how Molly's father had courted her, the dances they had gone to, the life they had built together. Your father loved me exactly as I was, Catherine said, her needle moving steadily through the fabric. He never tried to change me or make me into something I was not. That is what you deserve too, someone who sees your worth. But as the week progressed and Saturday drew closer, Molly began to hear the whispers. She was in the general store on Friday afternoon, picking up supplies for the restaurant, when she overheard a conversation between two women examining fabric near the front of the store. Did you hear? That new cowboy, the handsome one working out at the Reynolds Ranch, he is taking Molly Parker to the dance tomorrow. No, the one from the restaurant. But why would he do that? Martha says he must have lost a bet or something. No man that good-looking would willingly be seen with her unless there was some other reason. Maybe he feels sorry for her. You know, charity case and all that. Their laughter cut through Molly like a knife. She stood frozen in the aisle, holding a bag of flour, trying to decide whether to confront them or simply leave. Before she could make a decision, a familiar voice spoke up from behind the counter. Excuse me, ladies. It was Mr. Henderson who owned the store. His voice was cold. I will thank you not to spread gossip in my establishment. Molly Parker is one of the finest young women in this town, and anyone would be lucky to escort her anywhere. If you cannot conduct yourselves with decency, you can take your business elsewhere. The two women sputtered indignantly but fell silent. Molly quickly paid for her items and left, grateful to Mr. Henderson but shaken by what she had heard. That evening, as she helped her mother close up the restaurant, the doubts crept in stronger than ever. What if they were right? What if Owen did not really want to be seen with her? What if this whole thing was some kind of elaborate joke that she was too naive to understand? She barely slept that night, tossing and turning as worst-case scenarios played through her mind. By the time dawn broke, and she had to start the morning baking, she had almost convinced herself to tell Owen she had changed her mind about the dance. But then he walked through the door for his usual breakfast, and the genuine pleasure in his face when he saw her made all those doubts seem smaller. He ate quickly, and then approached the counter where she was tallying the morning's receipts. "I know I am early," he said, "but I wanted to make sure you were still planning on tonight. I have been looking forward to it all week." The honesty in his voice steadied her. "I am still planning on it," she said. 6 o'clock. Perfect. I will be there." He hesitated, then added, "Molly, I know this town can be small-minded. If anyone says anything tonight, anything at all that bothers you, you tell me." "All right," she nodded, touched by his protectiveness. "All right." The rest of the day dragged by at a painful pace. Molly went through the motions of serving lunch, cleaning up, helping her mother prepare for the next day. Finally, as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, she went upstairs to the small apartment above the restaurant that she shared with her mother and began to get ready. Catherine helped her into the blue dress, then sat her down to arrange her hair. As she worked, pinning dark curls into an elegant style, she spoke quietly. "Whatever happens tonight, remember who you are. You are kind, talented, hardworking, and beautiful. Anyone who cannot see that is not worth your time." "I am scared," Molly admitted. "I know, sweetheart, but sometimes the things that scare us most are the things most worth doing." When Catherine finally stepped back to let Molly see herself in the mirror, Molly barely recognized her own reflection. The blue dress fit perfectly, highlighting her curves rather than trying to hide them. Her hair was swept up in a style that showed off her face, and her eyes seemed brighter somehow, filled with nervous anticipation. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock sounded on the door. Molly took a deep breath, squeezed her mother's hand once for luck, and went to answer it. Owen stood on the other side, cleaned up and dressed in his Sunday best. His dark pants were pressed, his white shirt was crisp and clean, and he held his hat in his hands. When he saw Molly, his eyes widened and a slow smile spread across his face. "You look absolutely beautiful," he said, and there was such sincerity in his voice that Molly felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric of his shirt. Catherine watched from the doorway as they walked down the stairs and out onto the street, where Owen's horse and a small buggy waited. "I borrowed this from Mr. Reynolds," Owen explained as he helped her into the seat. "Figured it would be more comfortable than riding double on horseback in that pretty dress." The town hall was only a few blocks away, but the ride gave them time to talk. Owen told her about his day working at the Reynolds ranch, about the new colt that had been born that morning, about his plans to save up enough money to eventually buy his own piece of land. "I have been drifting for a while," he admitted. "After my parents died 3 years ago, I sold the family farm in Texas and just started moving. Worked on ranches from there to here, never staying anywhere too long. But there is something about Coloma that feels different, like maybe it is time to put down roots." "What made you leave Texas?" Molly asked. "Too many memories. My parents died in a fire, and I could not look at that land anymore without seeing what I had lost, so I ran from it instead of dealing with it. Probably not the smartest thing I have ever done, but it is what I needed at the time. I am sorry about your parents." "Thank you. And I am sorry about your father. Your mother mentioned he passed a few years back." They arrived at the town hall to find it already bustling with activity. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light across the wooden floor. A group of musicians was setting up in the corner, tuning fiddles and adjusting the piano. People milled about in their finest clothes, talking and laughing. As Owen helped Molly down from the buggy, she saw heads turn in their direction. The conversations did not stop, but they shifted, and she knew people were talking about them. Her stomach clenched with anxiety, but Owen seemed completely unbothered. He kept his hand at the small of her back as they entered the hall, a protective and claiming gesture that did not go unnoticed. Martha Jenkins approached them almost immediately, her daughter Sarah in tow. Martha's smile was sharp as a knife. "Why, Molly Parker, I did not expect to see you here tonight, and Mr. Cooper, what a surprise." "Evening, Mrs. Jenkins," Owen said politely but coolly. "You two make such an interesting pair," Martha continued, her eyes scanning Molly from head to toe. "Quite unexpected." "I consider myself lucky," Owen said firmly. "Molly is the most beautiful woman in this room, and I am proud to be here with her." Martha's smile faltered, and she made a dismissive sound before moving away. Sarah glanced back over her shoulder at them, her expression thoughtful rather than mocking. "Thank you," Molly whispered to Owen. "I meant every word," he replied. "Now, would you like some punch?" "I am betting it is not nearly as good as your coffee, but it might be cold at least." They made their way to the refreshment table, and Owen got them both cups of punch. As they stood sipping the sweet drink, several of Owen's co-workers from the Reynolds Ranch came over to greet them. The men were friendly and respectful, making Molly feel more at ease. When the music started, Owen set down his cup and offered his hand. "May I have this dance?" Molly hesitated. She had never been much of a dancer, always too self-conscious about how she looked to really try. "I am not very good," she warned. "Neither am I. We will figure it out together." He led her onto the floor just as the band struck up a lively tune. Owen proved to be a better dancer than he had claimed, guiding her through the steps with easy confidence. Molly stumbled once or twice, but he steadied her each time with a reassuring squeeze of her hand. As they moved through the dance, Molly became aware of the stares, of the whispers behind raised hands. She tried to ignore them, to focus on Owen and the music, but it was hard to block out completely. They had just finished their second dance when Molly excused herself to visit the washroom. Owen nodded and went to get more punch while she slipped down the hallway toward the back of the building. She had just finished and was about to return to the main hall when she heard voices in the corridor. Recognizing Martha Jenkins' sharp tone, she paused just inside the doorway, out of sight. "I still say there has to be some explanation," Martha was saying. "Men like that do not go for women like her." "Maybe he has poor eyesight," another woman suggested with a laugh. "Or maybe he is just desperate, new in town, does not know anyone, willing to take whatever he can get. Poor thing probably thinks he actually likes her. Can you imagine? She probably thinks this is real." Molly pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the color drain from her face. All her old insecurities came rushing back, louder than ever. Of course this was not real. Of course Owen did not actually want to be with her. How could she have been so stupid as to believe otherwise? She was about to step out into the hallway when she heard heavy footsteps, and then Owen's voice, tight with anger. "Ladies, I could not help but overhear your conversation." There was a moment of awkward silence. "We were just talking," Martha said defensively. "You were being cruel, and I want to make something very clear. I asked Molly to this dance because I wanted to, because she is kind, intelligent, talented, and yes, beautiful. Every word I said to her is true. And if any of you have a problem with that, then that is your issue to deal with, not ours." "Well, I never," Martha huffed. "Maybe you should try it sometime," Owen shot back. "Being decent to people, I mean. Now if you will excuse me, I need to find my date." Molly heard him walk away, and she stepped out of the washroom before Martha and her friends could come around the corner. She made her way back to the main hall on shaky legs, her mind spinning. Owen was waiting near the refreshment table, 2 cups of punch in his hands. When he saw her, relief washed over his face. "There you are, I was starting to worry." "I heard you," Molly said quietly, "in the hallway with Mrs. Jenkins." His jaw tightened. "I am sorry you had to hear that. The things they were saying, they were not true, you know that, right?" I do not know what to believe, Molly admitted, her voice shaking. All my life, people have treated me like I am less than because of how I look. Why would you be any different? Owen set down the cups and took both of her hands in his. Come with me, he said gently. Let us go somewhere we can talk properly. He led her outside, away from the noise and the crowd, to a quiet spot behind the building where they could see the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The music from inside was muted here, a distant backdrop to the sound of crickets and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Molly, look at me, Owen said, and she raised her eyes to meet his. I am not them. I am not the people in this town who have been cruel to you. When I look at you, I do not see whatever it is they see. I see a woman who gets up before dawn every day to bake bread for strangers. I see someone who takes care of her mother and keeps her father's dream alive through that restaurant. I see someone who is good and kind and real in a way that most people never manage to be. But wait, what about it? Owen interrupted. You think that matters to me. You think that changes who you are as a person. Molly, there are rail, thin women in there who are ugly on the inside, and that is the kind of ugly that matters. You are beautiful inside and out, and I do not say that lightly. I have heard pretty words before, Molly said, her voice breaking, and they always turned out to be lies. Then those men were fools, and I am sorry they hurt you, but I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that I am different. I am asking you to believe that I mean what I say. Tears were streaming down Molly's face now, and she did not try to stop them. I want to believe you. I want that so badly, but I am so scared of being hurt again. Owen reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumbs, his touch infinitely tender. I cannot promise that I will never hurt you. People mess up, say the wrong thing, make mistakes. But I can promise that I will never lie to you about who you are or what you mean to me. And I can promise that I will stand by you against anyone who tries to make you feel less than you are. Why? Molly whispered. Why do you care so much? Because from the moment I walked into that restaurant and saw you, something clicked into place. Like I had been wandering around lost and suddenly found the path home. I know that probably sounds crazy. We barely know each other, but I feel something real here, and I think you do too. So I am asking you to be brave enough to see where this goes. Molly took a shaky breath, then another. Everything in her life had taught her to protect herself, to keep her walls up. But standing here with Owen, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands on her face, she felt those walls beginning to crumble. I am scared, she said again. I know, but I am right here with you. You are not alone in this. A burst of laughter came from inside the hall, and Molly realized they had been out here long enough that people would start to talk. We should go back inside. Do you want to? Owen asked. Because we do not have to. We can leave right now if you would rather. I took you to this dance for you, not for them. Whatever makes you comfortable is what we will do. The fact that he was giving her the choice, that he was putting her comfort ahead of what people might think, made something shift inside Molly's chest. She looked toward the hall, then back at Owen. I want to go back inside, she said firmly. I want to dance with you some more, and I want everyone in there to see that I am done being ashamed of who I am. Pride flickered in Owen's eyes. That is my girl, he said softly, and Molly felt warmth bloom through her whole body at those words. They walked back inside together, hand in hand. As they stepped through the door, Molly could feel eyes on them, could sense the renewed whispers. But instead of shrinking away, she held her head high and let Owen lead her back onto the dance floor. The band was playing a slower song now, and Owen pulled her close, one hand at her waist and the other holding hers. They swayed together to the music, and Molly found herself relaxing into his embrace, her head resting against his shoulder. See, Owen murmured near her ear. Nothing to be afraid of. As they danced, Molly noticed a few things changing around them. Sarah Jenkins broke away from her mother to dance with one of the ranch hands, and as she passed, she gave Molly a small, almost apologetic smile. A few of the other younger women were watching not with disdain, but with something that looked almost like envy. And the men from the Reynolds ranch were making a point to greet Owen and Molly warmly whenever they passed. By the end of the evening, Molly felt like a different person than the one who had arrived. Her fears had not completely disappeared, but they had been pushed back, made smaller by Owen's unwavering support and her own decision to stop letting other people's opinions control her life. When Owen drove her home, they sat in the buggy outside the restaurant for a long moment, neither quite ready for the evening to end. "Thank you," Molly said finally, "for tonight, for standing up for me, for everything." "You do not have to thank me for treating you the way you deserve to be treated. That should be the standard, not the exception. Can I ask you something? Anything? What happens now? You said you are working at the Reynolds ranch. How long are you staying in Coloma?" Owen was quiet for a moment, and Molly felt her heart sink. Of course. He was just passing through like he had been passing through everywhere else for the past 3 years. This was a nice night, a moment out of time, but it did not mean anything long-term. But then Owen spoke, and his words caught her completely by surprise. "I talked to Mr. Reynolds yesterday. He offered me a permanent position managing his horse program. It is good work, good pay, and it would let me stay in Coloma long-term. I have not given him an answer yet because I was not sure what I wanted to do. But after tonight, after being with you, I think I know." "What do you want to do?" Molly asked, hardly daring to breathe. "I want to stay. I want to see where this goes between us. I want to have breakfast at your restaurant every morning and take you on drives on Sunday afternoons, and eventually, if things work out the way I hope they will, I want to build a life here. With you." The honesty in his voice was staggering. "We barely know each other," Molly said, but her heart was racing with hope. "Then let us get to know each other, properly. Let me court you, Molly Parker. Let me prove to you that what I feel is real." "Yes," Molly said, the word coming out before she could second-guess herself. "Yes, I would like that very much." Owen's smile was brilliant in the moonlight. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Then I will see you tomorrow morning for breakfast, and every morning after that." Molly went to bed that night feeling like she was floating. Her mother was waiting up for her, eager to hear every detail of the evening, and Molly found herself talking late into the night, reliving each moment. The weeks that followed were the happiest Molly could remember in a long time. Owen was true to his word, showing up every morning for breakfast at the restaurant. He took the permanent position at the Reynolds ranch, and on Sundays, their only free day, he would pick Molly up in the afternoon, and they would go for long drives in the countryside, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the dreams he had for the future. She told him about her childhood in Coloma, about her father and how much she missed him, about her love of baking and her hopes of maybe expanding the restaurant one day. They talked about serious things and silly things, discovered shared interests, and debated their differences. Owen made her laugh in a way she had not laughed in years, and she found herself opening up to him in ways she had never opened up to anyone. But it was not all easy. There were still people in town who made snide comments, who looked at them with judgment or confusion. One afternoon in late September, about 6 weeks after the dance, Molly was at the general store when Martha Jenkins cornered her in the fabric aisle. "I do not know what game you are playing with that cowboy," Martha said in a low voice, But mark my words, it will not last. Men like him do not stay with women like you. Eventually, he will see what everyone else sees and move on to someone more suitable." The words hurt, but they did not devastate Molly the way they might have 2 months earlier. She looked Martha square in the eye and said calmly, "What Owen sees when he looks at me is none of your concern, and neither is our relationship. Now, if you will excuse me, I have shopping to finish." She walked away with her head high, and though her hands were shaking slightly, she felt proud of herself for standing up to Martha's cruelty. When she told Owen about the encounter that evening, his jaw clenched with anger. That woman needs to learn to mind her own business. She does. But her opinion does not matter. Not anymore. The only opinions I care about are yours and mine. Well, my opinion is that you handled that perfectly, and my opinion is also that you are the strongest woman I have ever met. I do not feel very strong most of the time. Strength is not about never being afraid or never being hurt. It is about picking yourself up and keeping going anyway. And you do that every single day. As fall deepened, and the leaves turned gold and red in the hills around Coloma, Molly found herself falling more deeply in love with Owen Cooper. It was in the small gestures, the little moments that built up day after day. The way he always made sure to tell her mother hello and ask how she was doing. The way he remembered that she liked wildflowers and would bring her small bouquets he picked on his rides around the ranch. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. One Sunday in early October, Owen picked her up for their usual drive, but instead of heading out into the countryside, he drove to a piece of land on the outskirts of town. It was beautiful property, with rolling hills and a creek running through it and a perfect view of the mountains in the distance. "What are we doing here?" Molly asked as Owen helped her down from the buggy. "I wanted to show you something. This land is for sale, has been for a while. The owner moved back east and just wants to unload it. I have been saving my pay from the ranch and I have almost enough for a down payment." Molly's heart began to beat faster. "You are thinking of buying land. I am thinking of putting down roots. Real roots. I talked to Mr. Reynolds, and he is willing to sell me some breeding stock at a good price. I could start my own horse ranch, build it up slowly while still working for him part-time. Eventually, I could build a house here, have a real home." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Molly, I know we have only been courting for a couple of months. I know that is not very long in the grand scheme of things. But I also know what I feel, and I know what I want for my future. And what I want is you. I want to build a life here in Coloma with you by my side." Tears were welling up in Molly's eyes. "Owen, I am not asking you to marry me today," he continued. "I know we need more time, and I want to do this right. I want to be able to provide for you, to give you the kind of life you deserve. But I need you to know that this is where I am heading. That my future plans include you in every way, and I need to know if that is something you want too." "Yes," Molly said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, that is what I want. I love you, Owen. I think I have loved you since that first morning when you walked into the restaurant and smiled at me like I was the only person in the world." "You are the only person in my world," Owen said softly. "Well, you and your mother's excellent coffee." Molly laughed through her tears, and Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close. They stood there on that piece of land, wrapped in each other's embrace as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. "I love you too," Owen murmured into her hair. "I love everything about you. Your kindness, your strength, your laugh, the way you hum when you are baking. I love how you take care of the people around you and how you always see the best in everyone even when they do not deserve it. I love every single thing that makes you who you are." When they finally pulled apart, Molly looked around at the land with new eyes, imagining the future that could be built here. A house, a barn, horses grazing in the fields, maybe children one day running through the grass and playing by the creek. It was a dream she had never let herself have before, too convinced that it would never be possible for someone like her. But Owen made it feel possible. He made everything feel possible. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking the property, making plans and sharing dreams. By the time Owen drove her home that evening, Molly felt like she was glowing from the inside out. Over the next few months, Owen worked tirelessly to save enough money for the land. Molly helped in the ways she could, setting aside a portion of the restaurant's profits and making extra baked goods to sell at the general store. Her mother was thrilled by the developing relationship, often telling Molly how much her father would have liked Owen. As winter settled over Coloma, bringing cold rains and occasional snow in the mountains, Molly and Owen's relationship continued to deepen. They spent cozy evenings by the fire in the apartment above the restaurant, with Owen reading aloud while Molly worked on mending or knitting. Catherine would join them sometimes, sharing stories about Molly's father and the early days of the restaurant. It was during one of these evenings, in mid-December with Christmas approaching, that Owen asked to speak with Catherine privately. Molly knew what was coming, and her heart raced as she waited in the kitchen while they talked in the sitting room. When Owen emerged, his face was lit up with joy. Catherine was wiping tears from her eyes but smiling broadly. "Your mother has given me her blessing," Owen said, taking Molly's hands, "which means I can finally do this properly." He dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. It was not fancy or elaborate, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "Molly Parker, you have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me a reason to stop running and start building a real life. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build our home together, raise our children together, grow old together. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Molly said without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that made her toes curl and her heart soar. Catherine clapped her hands together in delight, already making plans for the wedding. They decided to marry in the spring, which would give Owen time to finalize the purchase of the land and start building their house. Molly threw herself into wedding preparations with enthusiasm, though she was adamant that she did not want anything too elaborate or expensive. "I just want our friends and family there," she told Owen. "I do not need a fancy dress or a big party, I just need you." "You will have me," Owen promised. "Always." As word of their engagement spread through Coloma, the reaction was mixed. Most people were genuinely happy for them, but there were still those who could not resist making cruel comments. Molly overheard someone in the post office saying it was a shame Owen was settling for her when he could have done so much better. But these comments had lost their power to hurt her. She had Owen's love, her mother's support, and her own growing confidence. What anyone else thought simply did not matter anymore. One cold afternoon in January, Molly was working in the restaurant kitchen when Sarah Jenkins came in. She looked nervous, twisting her hands together as she approached the counter. "Molly, can I talk to you for a minute?" Molly set down the pie she was working on and nodded. "Of course." Sarah glanced around, making sure they were alone. "I wanted to apologize for my mother, for the things she said about you and for not speaking up when I should have. You have always been kind to me and I let my mother's prejudices influence how I treated you. That was not right." The apology was unexpected but welcome. "Thank you for saying that, Sarah. It means a lot." "The truth is, I am jealous," Sarah admitted. "You have something real with Owen. You have someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you look like or what your family name is. That is more than most of us will ever have." Molly felt a rush of sympathy for the younger woman. "You will find that too, Sarah. Just do not let your mother's voice in your head convince you otherwise." Sarah smiled weakly. "I am trying. Anyway, I wanted you to know that I think you and Owen are good together, and I wish you all the happiness in the world." After Sarah left, Molly stood in the kitchen feeling like something had shifted. Maybe the whole town would never accept her relationship with Owen, but individual people were starting to see past their prejudices. That was progress, however small. The winter months passed in a blur of activity. Owen worked with a crew to build the house on their land. A sturdy structure with a big kitchen for Molly to bake in, and a front porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. Catherine helped Molly sew her wedding dress. A simple but elegant gown in cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and sleeves. By the time spring arrived, painting the hills around Coloma in shades of green and covering them with wildflowers, everything was ready. The house was finished, furnished with pieces Owen had built himself and items Molly had collected over the months. The date was set for the last Saturday in April, and invitations had been sent out to their friends and neighbors. The night before the wedding, Molly stayed up late with her mother, talking about everything and nothing. Catherine was emotional, knowing that after tomorrow, Molly would be moving out of the apartment and into her new home with Owen. "I am so proud of you," Catherine said, holding her daughter's hands. "Your father would be too. You have grown into such a strong, confident woman, and you have found someone who sees your true worth. That is all I ever wanted for you." "I am going to miss living here with you," Molly said, tears streaming down her face. "I know. But you are not going far, and you will visit all the time. Plus, I expect to be kept very busy with grandchildren eventually." They both laughed at that, and the tension of the moment broke. Molly went to bed that night with her heart full of anticipation for what tomorrow would bring. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers through the open windows. Molly woke early, too excited to sleep, and spent the morning getting ready with her mother's help. When she finally looked at herself in the mirror, dressed in her wedding gown with her hair arranged in soft curls, she hardly recognized herself. She looked happy. She looked loved. She looked beautiful, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. The ceremony was held in the small church on Main Street, with the reception to follow at the new house. As Molly walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, she saw Owen standing at the altar, looking handsome in his best suit, and the expression on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. His eyes were shining with unshed tears, and his smile was so full of love that Molly felt her own tears starting to fall. When she reached his side, he took her hand and whispered, "You are the most beautiful sight I have ever seen." The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Molly heard herself saying her vows, heard Owen saying his, felt him slip a second ring onto her finger to match the engagement band. And then the minister was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Owen was kissing her to the sound of applause from their gathered friends and family. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Molly saw that the church was more full than she had expected. Not just their close friends, but many of the townspeople had come to witness the wedding. Mr. Henderson from the general store was there, beaming. The men from the Reynolds Ranch had taken up most of one pew. Even Sarah Jenkins was present, though her mother notably was not. The reception at the new house was a joyful affair. Tables had been set up outside, laden with food that Molly and Catherine had prepared over the past few days. Someone had brought a fiddle, and soon music filled the air as people danced and celebrated. As the sun began to set, casting everything in golden light, Owen pulled Molly aside for a moment of quiet. They stood on their new porch, looking out over their land, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Cooper?" "Like the luckiest woman in the world," Molly said, leaning back against him. "How about you, Mr. Cooper?" "The same." "I keep thinking about that first morning when I walked into your restaurant. If someone had told me then that I would find the love of my life over a plate of eggs and fresh bread, I would have thought they were crazy. I would have thought the same thing. I was so convinced that no one would ever see me as anything other than that fat girl from the restaurant. But you saw everything I was afraid no one would ever see." Owen turned her around to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You know what I see when I look at you? I see my wife. I see the woman I am going to grow old with. I see the mother of my future children. I see my partner in building this life we are starting. And yes, I see a beautiful woman inside and out. I always have from that very first day." "I love you so much," Molly whispered. "I love you too. And I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you know it." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Behind them, they could hear the music and laughter of their wedding guests. But in that moment, it was just the two of them, standing on the threshold of their new life together. The months that followed were filled with the joy and challenges of building their life together. Owen continued working with the Reynolds Ranch while slowly building up his own horse breeding program. Molly split her time between helping her mother at the restaurant and working on making their house a home. She planted a garden, filling it with vegetables and herbs for cooking. She set up a large kitchen workbench where she could bake to her heart's content, and she began experimenting with new recipes. Owen built her shelves for her growing collection of cookbooks and a special cooling rack for all the pies and cakes she was constantly making. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, watching the horses graze in the pasture and talking about their dreams for the future. Owen wanted to breed horses that were known throughout California for their quality and temperament. Molly talked about maybe opening her own bakery one day, separate from the restaurant, where she could focus entirely on the baking she loved. "We could do both," Owen said one evening in late summer. "Build up the horse ranch, and in a few years when we are more established, we could build a bakery in town. I would support any dream you want to pursue." That unconditional support, that belief in her abilities, never stopped amazing Molly. She had spent so much of her life being told she was not good enough, and now she had a partner who believed she could do anything she set her mind to. As fall arrived again, marking a year since Owen had proposed, Molly discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous to tell Owen, worried about how this would change their carefully laid plans, but his reaction put all her fears to rest. "A baby," he exclaimed, picking her up and spinning her around before carefully setting her back down. "We are going to have a baby. Molly, this is the best news." "This is perfect. Are you sure? I know we wanted to wait a bit longer until the ranch was more established. Plans can change. This is a good change. This is a wonderful change. We are going to be parents." His excitement was contagious, and soon Molly found herself just as thrilled about the impending arrival. They spent the winter preparing a nursery in one of the spare bedrooms, with Owen building a crib and a rocking chair while Molly sewed blankets and tiny clothes. Catherine was beside herself with joy at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. She immediately began planning all the things she would teach her grandchild, all the recipes she would pass down, all the love she would shower on this new little person. The pregnancy was not always easy. Molly dealt with morning sickness and fatigue, and as she grew larger, she sometimes struggled with old insecurities about her body. But Owen was endlessly patient and supportive, always making sure she knew how beautiful he found her. "You are growing our child," he would say, his hand resting gently on her swollen belly. "You are creating a miracle. How could I see that as anything but beautiful?" Their son was born on a warm day in May, just over a year after their wedding. The labor was long and difficult, but when Molly finally held her baby in her arms, all the pain was forgotten. He was perfect, with a full head of dark hair and his father's green eyes. "What should we name him?" Owen asked, sitting beside Molly on the bed and looking down at their son with wonder. "What about James?" "After my father, James Cooper," Owen said softly. "It is perfect, just like him, just like you." Being a mother was harder than Molly had expected, but also more rewarding. The sleepless nights, the constant feeding, the worry that came with being responsible for another life, it was overwhelming at times. But watching Owen with their son, seeing the gentleness and love with which he cared for James, made everything worthwhile. As James grew from a newborn into an infant and then a toddler, their little family found its rhythm. Molly reduced her hours at the restaurant, going in just a few times a week to help her mother during busy periods. Owen hired additional help for the ranch so he could spend more time at home with his family. They took James on walks around their property, letting him toddle through the grass and laugh at the horses. They read to him every night, sang him songs, and filled their home with love and laughter. When James was 2 years old, Molly discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, maybe because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in the autumn, a tiny thing with Molly's dark curls and a fierce determination that was evident from day one. They named her Elizabeth, and she completed their family in a way Molly had not known was missing. Watching James carefully hold his baby sister, seeing Owen's face as he cradled his daughter, Molly felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. "Is this real?" she asked Owen one evening when the children were asleep, and they were sitting on the porch in the cool autumn air. "Sometimes I feel like I am going to wake up and discover this was all a dream." "It is real," Owen assured her, taking her hand. "Every moment, every day. This life we have built together is as real as anything can be. I never thought I would have this. A husband who loves me, children, a home. I thought those things were for other people, not for me. You deserve all of this and more. And I am grateful every single day that you gave me a chance, that you believed in what we could be together." As the years passed, their life continued to grow and flourish. Owen's horse breeding program became known throughout the region for producing excellent animals, and the ranch prospered. Molly eventually did open her own bakery in town, a small shop that quickly became a favorite gathering place for the community. Catherine remained a central part of their lives, spending most of her days with her grandchildren and helping out at both the restaurant and the bakery. She taught Elizabeth to bake just as she had taught Molly, passing down recipes and techniques that had been in the family for generations. James grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved the horses and spent hours following his father around the ranch. Elizabeth was more outgoing, always talking, always asking questions, always finding new ways to make her family laugh. There were challenges, of course. A bad winter when they nearly lost their entire herd. An illness that swept through the town and kept them all worried sick until everyone recovered. The normal struggles of raising children, managing a business, keeping a marriage strong through the stresses of daily life. But through it all, Owen and Molly faced everything together. They had built something solid and true, a love that had weathered doubt and cruelty and come out stronger on the other side. Sometimes, usually on quiet Sunday afternoons when the children were playing and Owen was working in the barn, Molly would stand on the porch of their home and think about how different her life had turned out from what she had once expected. She thought about the young woman she had been, convinced that she was not worthy of love or happiness because of how she looked. If she could go back and tell that young woman what the future held, she would want her to know that the right person would see past all the things that did not matter. That true love was not about appearance or living up to someone else's standards, but about finding someone who valued you for exactly who you were. She thought about that night at the dance, when Martha Jenkins had tried to poison her joy with cruel words. About how Owen had stood up for her, had defended her, had made it clear that his feelings were real and true. That moment had been a turning point, the moment when she had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved the happiness that seemed to come so easily to others. One evening in late spring, when James was 10 and Elizabeth was 8, the whole family was sitting around the dinner table. James was talking about a new colt that had been born that day, describing in enthusiastic detail how strong and fast it was going to be. Elizabeth was interrupting constantly with her own observations and questions, and Catherine was laughing at the cheerful chaos of it all. Owen caught Molly's eye across the table and smiled, that same warm smile that had captured her heart years ago. She smiled back, her heart full to bursting with love for this family they had created together. After dinner, when the children were in bed and Catherine had returned to her own small house that Owen had built for her near the ranch, Molly and Owen sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were out, bright and clear in the night sky, and the air was sweet with the scent of the roses Molly had planted along the fence. "You remember that first morning?" Molly asked. "When you came into the restaurant, every detail," Owen replied. "You had flour on your nose from the baking, and you looked at me like you were not sure whether to trust me. I thought you were the most interesting person I had ever met. I thought you were too handsome to be real. I kept waiting for you to turn out to be a trick, some kind of cosmic joke. Instead, I turned out to be the luckiest man alive." Molly leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in the silence that fell between them. It was the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other completely, who had shared years of joys and sorrows, who had built a life together from nothing but hope and determination. "Thank you," Molly said quietly. "For what? For seeing me, for loving me, for giving me all of this." Owen wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "You gave yourself all of this. I was just smart enough to recognize what I had found when I met you. But the strength, the courage to let yourself be loved, that was all you. We did it together," Molly said. "Everything good in my life, we did it together." As they sat there under the stars, Molly thought about how far she had come from that scared, insecure young woman who had been so sure she would never be good enough. She thought about the day Owen had held her close and told her she was perfect, exactly as she was. Those words had changed everything, had given her the courage to believe in herself and in the possibility of love. But the real transformation had not come from Owen's words alone. It had come from his consistent actions, his unwavering support, his steady presence through every challenge they had faced. It had come from learning to see herself through his eyes, and eventually, through her own eyes, with compassion and acceptance. She was no longer the woman who flinched at cruel comments or hid herself away to avoid judgment. She was a wife, a mother, a successful baker, a friend to many in the community. She was strong and capable and loved, not despite her weight or her appearance, but simply for who she was as a person. The years continued to roll by, marked by the ordinary miracles of everyday life. James eventually took over more of the ranch operations, showing a natural talent for working with horses that made Owen beam with pride. Elizabeth, true to her talkative nature, became a teacher, opening a small school in Coloma where she taught the children of miners and ranchers with patience and enthusiasm. Both children married eventually, bringing new members into the family. James chose a kind young woman named Rebecca who loved the ranch almost as much as he did. Elizabeth married a gentle man named Thomas who worked at the bank and wrote poetry in his spare time. Molly and Owen became grandparents multiple times over, and their house was often filled with the laughter and chaos of visiting grandchildren. Catherine lived to see her great-grandchildren born, passing away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, content in the knowledge that her daughter had found true happiness. As Molly and Owen grew older together, their love deepened in ways they had not anticipated when they were young. There was a comfort in knowing someone so completely, in having weathered decades of life together. They knew each other's habits and quirks, could communicate with just a glance, could sit in companionable silence for hours and feel perfectly content. Owen's hair turned silver, and lines formed around his eyes from years of smiling and squinting into the sun. Molly's dark hair went gray, and her body changed in the ways bodies do with age. But when Owen looked at her, his eyes still lit up with the same love and admiration they always had. One afternoon in their later years, when they were both well into their 60s, Molly and Owen took a walk around their property. It had been decades since they had bought this land, since Owen had shown her this place and told her about his dreams for their future. Those dreams had all come true and then some. They walked slowly, hand in hand, past the barn where the horses nickered in greeting, past the garden where vegetables grew in neat rows, past the spot where Elizabeth and James had played as children. They stopped at the creek, watching the water flow over smooth stones, the same creek that had been here when they first fell in love with this land. "You have any regrets?" Owen asked. "Anything you wish had been different?" Molly thought for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "Not about anything important. There were hard times, sad times, but I would not change any of it because it all led us here. I feel the same way, though if I could go back and punch a few people who were cruel to you, I might take that opportunity." Molly laughed. "Still protecting me after all these years?" "Always. That is part of the marriage vows, is it not? Love, honor, and defend against gossipy busybodies." They stood by the creek for a while longer, then made their way back to the house. That evening, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sun set over the mountains. "You know what I remember most about our early days," Molly said. "It is not the wedding or even when the children were born, though those were wonderful. It is that moment at the dance when you held me close and told me I was perfect. That was when I started to believe it was possible for someone to love me." Owen reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. "You were perfect then, and you are perfect now. Not because you are without flaws, nobody is, but because you are exactly who you are supposed to be, and I have been grateful for you every single day of our lives together." "I love you," Molly said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too. Forever and always." As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, they sat together in the comfortable silence of a love that had stood the test of time. Their story had started with judgment and doubt, with a young woman convinced she was unworthy of love and a cowboy who saw past all the superficial things to the beautiful person beneath. But it had become so much more than that. It had become a story of partnership and family, of dreams achieved and challenges overcome. It had become a story of two people who chose each other every day, who built a life together filled with love and laughter and purpose. In the end, It was a story that proved what Molly had learned all those years ago in Owen's arms. That true love sees what really matters. That worth is not measured by appearance or by what other people think. And that the courage to be yourself and to let yourself be loved can lead to a happiness beyond anything you ever imagined possible. Their children and grandchildren would tell their story for generations. The tale of the cowboy who walked into a restaurant one morning and found the love of his life, and the woman who learned that she was worthy of that love. It was a story with a simple message but a profound truth, that everyone deserves to be loved exactly as they are, and that finding that love can change everything. As Molly drifted off to sleep that night, nestled against Owen's side as she had been for decades, she thought about how grateful she was for every moment of this life they had built together. From that first morning when he walked into her restaurant to this very night, surrounded by the evidence of the life and love they had created, it had all been worth it. She had been mocked for her weight, told she was not good enough, made to feel less than by people who could not see past the surface. But the cowboy had held her close and said she was perfect, and in doing so had given her the courage to believe it herself. That belief had carried her through decades of joy and sorrow, had given her the strength to build a beautiful life, had allowed her to love and be loved in the deepest and most meaningful way possible. And as she fell asleep, her last conscious thought was simple but profound. She was happy, truly happy, and that happiness was something she had earned through courage and faith and the willingness to believe that she deserved it. That, in the end, was the greatest gift Owen had given her. Not his love, though that was precious beyond measure, but the belief in herself that his love had helped her find. Their story was complete, a full and rich life lived together with love at its center. And in Coloma, California, in the house they had built on land they had chosen together, two people who had found each other against the odds slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that their love had been real, true, and lasting. It was a love that would be remembered and celebrated by the family they had created, a testament to the power of seeing past the superficial to the beautiful soul beneath, and a reminder that everyone deserves to find the person who will hold them close and tell them they are perfect, exactly as they are.